All right. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Wednesday, September 22nd, 2021 business meeting of the Richmond Community Schools Board of Trustees. I'd like to call the meeting to order and move to consent items. Dr. Wright.
Yes, so Board President, Trustees, I ask for consent of items 2.1 through 2.6 as presented.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Jeff Slifer.
I'll second that.
Second by Kristen Brunton. Do we have any questions or comments? Seeing none, I will call the roll. John Weber. Excuse me. Please respond affirmative with aye. Negative, nay. I will go through the roll. John Weber, aye. Jeff Slifer.
Aye.
Nicole Stoltz.
Aye.
Brad Walton.
Aye.
Kristen Brunton.
Aye.
Aaron Stevens.
Aye.
Keith Morey.
Your mic is off, Mr. Morey. Your mic is off, sir.
Okay. What are we eyeing?
Consent items.
Okay. Yep. Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes 7-0. I'd like to move on to our public hearing.
Board President, Trustees, I ask that Mr. Scalf, who is virtually present, come before the board to present the public hearing address regarding budget.
All right. I would like to declare the public hearing regarding the budget open. The purpose of this hearing is to offer the public an opportunity for comments and questions regarding the 2022 through 2024 capital projects plan, the 2022 through 2026 school bus replacement plan, and the 2022 budgets. Karen Scalf, Chief Financial Officer, will present this information. We will invite questions at the conclusion of each portion of this presentation. Mrs. Scalf.
Okay, I'm going to try to share my screen. See if we can. Okay. I apologize. I'm getting used to this. Okay, so tonight it is my pleasure to present you with a super exciting public hearing on our 2022 budget. One thing that we always like to keep in mind, and we're going to start over, is why we do what we do. And so you'll see some pictures as we review our notice to taxpayers. This is posted in the Gateway online, which is the transparency portal that the state of Indiana utilizes for budget information. And this has been posted for the required 10 calendar days prior to this hearing. It provides all of the information on our budget estimates, our levies, and our estimated percentage of change. One thing that I will note is that this notice is higher than what we expect to see in the budget when we actually get that approved. And that is in order to provide a max levy to the district, which is the normal process established by the Department of Local Government Finance. So just as you can see, a number of things go into the budget. We have buildings, we have grounds, we have transportation and buses, and then we have all of those great things that we do in our classrooms. So special services and graduation and all of those things, that is our end goal, to see our students succeed. And all of that is neatly packaged into this budget as we look to make that effective for next year. So just some basic fundamentals of the budget. Our basic grant estimate is $34,334,814. We did have an ADM on Friday of 4429 student population. That is K through 12. Pre-K is not a part of that ADM and is currently not funded through the basic grant programs. That is a per student funding amount of $7,272.08. Then you will see below just an outline of the three major funds in our budget. So the education fund, we have proposed a budget of $43,811,984. What I can say is that we have done that so that we can maximize our appropriation. However, we do zero base our budget and we make cuts accordingly in order to balance to that basic grant amount, as well as the relatively minimal miscellaneous revenue that happens throughout the year. And now things have changed, so that is basically just summer school reimbursement and a few odds and ends. So we will balance that budget closer to the just over 35, 36 mark. However, we do want to make sure that we cover ourselves should there be any growth in that basic grant. So we do estimate our budget high. Just a little bit about what the education fund is. It is our curriculum areas, our special services, so special education, and alternative education, as well as any kind of language needs and student support services, as well as athletics. So primarily that consists of salaries and benefits in the classroom and directly related to it, professional development, and supplies. The other thing that is contained in the education fund are student services and partnerships, and some of those that impact our budget the most are communities and schools. Centerstone, we utilize presence learning for teletherapy services for our special services group. We have Ivy Tech as a partner for our CNA program, and the City of Richmond is a partner for our fire and rescue program at the high school. Those are our major factors in our education fund. Our debt service fund has a budget proposed of $4,297,716. This does include 2018 bonds, 2020, as well as our proposed 2021 bonds. That will, it is based high. We do expect that to come down a bit as we finalize and close those 2021 bonds in late October, early November. The operations fund then is our last primary fund where we budget routinely and annually. That budget is proposed at $24,611,953. What that is made up of is 5 buses that we'll replace next year, the transportation costs for services, as well as our facility needs, administrative costs at the district level, and utilities and insurance. So if we move on to a little bit more detail in that capital projects, transportation, and bus replacement area, there's a few things that we'll talk about. So we will replace 5 yellow buses, one of which has a wheelchair lift. The piece that is our transportation services is our contract with Student Transit. That is still current and will remain the same for next year. Facility updates include our routine maintenance, which is generally carpet, paint, just replacements of normal or what we call routine things. We also have planned to finish ESSER projects. So we know that there are areas that we have going right now. We will continue that process throughout the 2024 budget year, but we will try to get those finished a little bit each year. Then at RHS, this is where primarily the facilities budget is going. We do have the second and third floor bid overages that the board approved would be coming from the capital funds. We have flooring that we know that will come in a little bit higher than what our budget estimate was in those 2020 bonds. So we plan to utilize capital funds to cover that difference. McGuire Hall, we don't have any plans for overage at the present moment. However, there are some conversations being had about possible needs as we move forward. We do have a little bit of overage in the bid. However, we do look to discuss possibilities with the redevelopment commission on that, but I did want to allow for that in the budget should we need it. We also know that the area above the Tiano pool in the roof is going to need some repair. So that has been planned in the capital plan, as well as any overages we may come to with the 2021 bond mechanical modernization plans. We do write professional services into the plan as well. Those are primarily at the high school for next year. As we know, we will be working with project managers to finish those projects that you see on your screen. The other update we have is to paint the Fairview playground and possibly install some different equipment if funds allow. And we do work with our playground equipment company on matching grants. So that is one positive thing that we'll look toward for next year at Fairview. The one thing I'll note about this fund is that it does get directly impacted with circuit breakers, and those are tax cap credits that our taxpayers see the benefit of in receiving a 1% cap on any homestead properties, 2% on farm ground or rental properties, and 3% on commercial. So that does affect us pretty dramatically. In 2021, our actual realized circuit breaker loss is $2,866,522.92. And in 22, the Department of Local Government Finance estimates us at over $3 million in loss. So we will be watching that closely, as that directly impacts how much we are able to complete when it comes to this fund. So just a couple of notes, and for board members, you have this information in your update from Friday on how the budget process works. So this really is a 12-month process, and maybe really even an 18-month process. We start in the spring with conversations with building administrators and team members that are in departments in which a budget directly impacts them or they have to manage. And we have discussions about change, if everything's okay. If they are asking for changes, I meet with the superintendent. We discuss viability and whether that change is going to happen or not based on the budget availability, or if it's even allowable. Sometimes that's always a question, as the state sometimes changes how things look in the budget. Then also in the spring, I meet with the superintendent and our facility managers, Mr. Hamilton and Mr. Slifer. We go over the needs that we had during the prior year, and we prioritize needs moving into the next year. We begin work on our 10-year capital plan, and we work that document fluidly for at least 2 to 3 months, and we try to get that finished up in the later part of June, early part of July. It is a working document. We try to make sure that we keep that up throughout the year. We make notes on everything as we go. And I have a folder that as soon as I get the 22 year complete, I start a folder for 23. So the budget is always working. We do keep pretty thorough notes, and we get reports throughout the year from state agencies that provide us with the data that we need to complete the budget later in the year. So then in June, I also meet with the transportation department regarding bus replacement. We make sure that the plan is good. If we need to make adjustments, we do that. We also take a look at any special service needs that may have changed. Sometimes we do have to add additional special customizations to buses, and that's when we do that. And then on June 30, that's when fiscal year closes, and I utilize a end of year worksheet that then begins my budget sheet that finalizes into the documents that you have with you tonight as board members. July and August, we clean everything up. We put it on the appropriate Department of Local Government Finance forms, and then it's presented to you for approval. The final approval is required to be done with all noticing and everything put to bed not later than November 2nd. So we back our calendar up based on those dates, and this is just a real quick view of the calendar. Some things to note: we will be coming for adoption at the October 6th meeting. And then we'll have a remonstrance period just following that. We'll make contact with the county auditor after that period ends. And then we'll have our final submission of everything to the Department of Local Government Finance. One thing to note, we do have some cleanup from 2021 to do in our debt service fund. We need an additional appropriation of $300,000, and that is strictly for appropriation. So we do have the cash to make that happen. I will be bringing the paperwork to you as the board. At the October 6th board meeting, we will request to advertise the public hearing on the additional appropriation. And then Friday, October the 8th, we'll advertise that. You have to advertise it one time in 2 newspapers within your district. So we'll advertise that in the Palladium Item and the Western Wayne News. And then we'll have the board meeting to adopt Wednesday, October 27th. So there is a new process to that. Everything is in Gateway. It's a little bit different, and it is much more streamlined. So that will be an interesting thing to see come to fruition. So this is the public hearing for the capital projects plan, the 2022 budget, and the bus replacement plan. The information can be found again on the transparency portal. That is Gateway. And right now I will open it up to any questions.
Karen, I wasn't able to see that very first slide. Do you mind going back to that so I can get a screenshot of that? Thank you.
I'm going to have to figure out how I did that again. Just a second. This one? This one?
Yes, got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, why don't you just go ahead and email that to the board members then?
I can do that.
Because Jeff, you were supposed to be getting screenshots. Hello.
All right. Are there any questions? Okay, then it is my recommendation, Mr. President, that we can close the public hearing and entertain the motions for recommendation.
I want to be clear. Have we had opportunity for public hearing? And if so, what's the mechanism for that?
Don't we have folks outside?
Yeah. I believe Bridget, is there anyone in the public hearing that would have a question? Or like to speak or comment?
Looks like we were informed that they do not have any public commentary at this point.
Okay. And the board has no further comment?
Should they unmute that and say it so it comes up on the screen in the recording? Unmute.
Anybody have any comments? No. All in favor? Okay.
Thank you. Seeing none, I guess we, at this time, we're just closing the public hearing, correct, Ron? All right, then I would take a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
That was, who moved? I missed the.
Nicole.
moved.
Okay, Nicole Stoltz made the motion to close the public hearing, seconded by Aaron Stevens. I will call the roll again. Aye for affirmative.
Aye for affirmative.
Negative.
Negative.
John Weber, aye.
John Weber, aye.
Jeff Slifer,
Jeff Slifer, aye.
Nicole Stoltz,
Nicole Stoltz,
Aye.
aye.
Brad Walton,
Brad Walton, aye.
Kristen Brunton,
Kristen Brunton,
Aaron Stevens,
Aaron Stevens,
Aye.
aye.
Keith Morey,
Keith Morey,
Aye. Aye.
aye, aye.
thank you.
Thank
Motion
you. Motion
7-0 and public
7-0
hearing
and
closed.
closed.
Moving on to items.
Evans,
Dr. Wright.
Dr. Wright.
Board President,
Please.
I ask that Mr. Scalf come before us to present one donations. I'm sorry, Mrs. Scalf,
I was muted.
presentation.
Sorry. I was muted. So
Mrs. Scalf, I apologize. Yeah, I apologize. Interject. Mr. Stevens.
Aaron, I see Aaron's got his hand up. I also think if everybody else mutes, we won't have that.
My question is it just my computer or am I get the feedback? Is everyone else getting the same feedback that I'm getting?
Yes, sir. We just addressed that, and we asked that everyone just mute if they're not speaking. Yeah, so
Thank
hopefully that will solve the problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Morey, for the clarification, sir. Mrs. Scalf, the stage is yours, ma'am, virtually.
okay. So tonight we have a lot of donations before you. For the sake of time and the number, we will not read every single one, but if you look, most of them are from the class of 1971 for scholarships at RHS, and we cannot say thank you enough for their generous donations and the call to action that they have provided and are now tasking their fellow alumni in keeping up. So that was very fun and exciting to watch, and I do believe that we are still receiving donations from them. They had an overall goal of $50,000 for this, their 50th anniversary, and they are quickly coming close. So that's a really excellent thing to see, and it has been a whole lot of fun talking with them and getting to know them a little bit better. So also before you, we have donations for a lot of our athletic programs, as well as the Proudly Presenting series at Richmond at Civic Hall. So tonight it is my recommendation that we accept $67,741 in donations this month. And a very heartfelt thank you to our community.
Thank you, Mrs. Scalf. I'd be happy to entertain a motion. Go ahead, Aaron.
I move that we approve the donations as presented, and with heartfelt appreciation. The sad thing about it is it was reading through those that were dedicated in memory of. I also realized that there were 3 people that I knew who I was unaware of their passing. So my hats off go to the class of 71 and all those who donated.
I'll second.
Thank you. Second by Keith Morey. Any other questions or comments?
Board President, I also would just second what Mr. Echo, like the Echo what Trustee Stevens mentioned with regard to the class. As Mrs. Scalf referenced, I was asked to speak to the class of 71, and as was found in my board update a few weeks ago, I had a grand of a time with the class of 71. If I unfortunately do not make it to my own 50th reunion, to know that I hung out with the class of 71 for several hours as they embarked upon their memories. And as Mrs. Scalf mentioned, it was the class that had so many firsts. However, they are the first to raise such a challenge when it comes to raising money for Richmond Community Schools. And so, as Mr. Corsi mentioned, he has already put the challenge to the class of 72 to also raise another $50,000. And so they have been, I believe, going tit for tat on some of the social media as to whether or not the class of 72 will be able to live up to what was raised by the class of 71. And Trustee Stevens, as you also mentioned, that memorial that they had of those who had passed also included a few of my relatives, Mr. Joe Spicer.
Yes.
And Timothy Pennington. And so
Yep.
it was just a great time, but to know that that spirit still lives with that class is what Richmond Community Schools and we Red Devils have always been about. So I just want to add that. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, not seeing anyone. Oh, Mr.
Just
Morris.
awesome showing. I mean, somebody anonymously donated $15,000. That's pretty impressive. Again, bravo, class of 71, and laying down the challenge.
Yes.
And my mother is the class of 72, so she's anxiously excited to see if they can surpass class of 71.
Fantastic. I will call the roll. John Weber, aye. Jeff Slifer.
Jeff Slifer. Aye.
Nicole Stoltz.
Aye.
Brad Walton.
Aye.
Kristen Brunton.
Aye.
Aaron Stevens.
Aye.
Keith Morey.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes 7-0. Action item 4.02, Test and Dentist School Improvement Plans. Dr. Wright.
Board President, Trustees, I come before you to ask for approval of the 2021-2022 Test and Dentist School Improvement Plans as presented. I also would ask that if Mrs. O'Brien, our school assistant superintendent, has anything to weigh in on the proposal or the recommendation, if she would like to provide any clarifying points with
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Just a reminder to the board that school improvement plans are due to the state in the month of October. However, we do like our school improvement plans to be working documents, and so we usually complete those by the end of the school year with a summer approval by the board, so those documents are utilized at the buildings at the start of the school year. So that's why we have a little bit different timeline. However, with the reconfiguration of Test and Dentist, we did want to give some extended time for the newly reconfigured staff to be able to come together as they worked on this document and to finalize. And so tonight I bring to you the school improvement plans for Test and Dentist. At this time, I ask the board to approve the school improvement plans as presented.
Thank you, Mrs. O'Brien. Do we have any questions or comments from the board?
I'll make a motion that we approve them as presented.
Thank you, Brad. Motion by Brad Walton. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Keith Morey. Now, do we have any questions or comments? Was that a hand up, Mr. Morey? All right, seeing none, I will call the roll for approval. John Weber, aye.
John Weber, aye.
Jeff Slifer.
Jeff Slifer. Aye.
Nicole Stoltz.
Aye.
Brad Walton.
Aye.
Kristen Brunton.
Aye.
Aaron Stevens.
Aye.
Keith Morey.
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Motion passes 7-0. Thank you. Moving on to 4.03, board signatures. Dr. Wright.
President Weber, Trustees, I come before you to ask for approval of action item 4.03. The board authorized the typed entry of their signatures on documents for the September 22nd 2021 meeting of the Board of School Trustees as presented.
Thank you. I'd happily entertain a motion.
I make the motion that we approve action item 4.03 with board signatures.
Motion by Kristen Brunton,
Second.
second by Aaron Stevens. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I will call the roll. John Weber, aye.
Aye.
Jeff Slifer,
Aye.
Nicole Stoltz,
Aye.
Brad Walton,
Aye.
Kristen Brunton,
Aye.
Aaron Stevens,
Aye.
Keith Morey.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. That takes us on to policy review and update. Item 5.01, policy 7351, security breach of confidential database, second reading approval.
I'll make the motion that we approve the policy.
Motion by Jeff Slifer.
I'll second.
Is that Nicole?
Yep.
Second by Nicole Stoltz. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I will call the roll. John Weber, aye.
Aye.
Jeff Slifer,
Aye.
Nicole Stoltz,
Aye.
Brad Walton,
Aye.
Kristen Brunton,
Aye.
Aaron Stevens,
Aye.
Keith Morey,
Aye. Both of my computers just started updating, so
all right.
I'll be right back.
Thank you. Motion passes 7-0. Moving on to item 5.02, policy 6540, technology privacy, first reading.
Mr. President,
Yes,
I
sir.
move that we that we move policy 6540, the technology privacy, to second reading.
Motion by Aaron Stevens.
I'll second.
That Brad Walton.
Yep.
Second by Brad Walton. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, I will call the roll. John Weber, aye. Jeff Slifer,
Aye.
Nicole Stoltz,
Aye.
Brad Walton,
Aye.
Kristen Brunton,
Aye.
Aaron Stevens,
Aye.
Keith Morey.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Moving on to item 6, board reports and discussion. Dr. Wright.
President Weber, trustees, I ask that we open the floor for board report 6.01 regarding exceptional education. This is Sheila Hobbs, our exceptionally talented and wonderful director of exceptional learning, is here to present aspects of those things that occur within our department. Mrs. Hobbs.
Thank you and good evening. Just a little bit to share with you about the exceptional student education. It is no longer special education, but it includes all of the following: special education, Section 504, English language learners. We are in a high ability transition. McKinney-Vento, which is our homeless youth, as well as our Centerstone Partnership and social, emotional, and behavioral wellness. Currently in special education, we have 1,209 students, and that was
as of just a few weeks ago. So that number can slightly increase or decrease over time. But that is 26% district-wide students are special education. So that's 1 in every 4 students sitting in a classroom has an exceptional need. We also, of those 1,209, 347 have a secondary disability. So of the 1,209, not around 900 or 850 have a single disability, and another 347 have 1 or more disabilities. I currently work with 55 teachers, pre-K through 13, and when you see 13, people often wonder. Richmond High School does an amazing job with our adult education program. We have those kids that come back and continue to work out in our community through job coaching. And so that is extremely exciting. We have some great partnerships. Previously, before Mrs. Avery came along, we put kids mostly in restaurants but since then we have pre-COVID, let me say pre-COVID, we had students working in loading docks at some factories here in town, as well as working in Earlham in their cafeteria. And so she has expanded that beyond just restaurants. So I'm proud of that program. And that is a huge draw to our life skills or applied skills students. As you can see there, I have worked with a lot of itinerant staff. And we are lucky to have a blind low vision teacher and a deaf hard of hearing teacher. That is super rare right now in corporations, and people are looking at very unique ways of sharing those folks. But Miss Lettington and Miss Van Meter are full-time for RCS, so that's super exciting. I have been able to contract or actually have a part-time school psychologist. That's another one that's very, very hard to find right now. But I do have one of our diagnosticians who is currently enrolled in a school psych program with the agreement to come and work for RCS when she completes that. So we're super excited to have Miss Ansel continuing that work.
Sheila, can I interrupt just briefly?
Sure,
is it possible for you to share the screen just so this is part of the...
Well, of course. That's why I have this on there.
Perfect. Thank you.
My apologies, Keith. I had this great presentation all ready for you guys. Are you able to see it?
Well, I wanted you to get credit for it.
Yeah. Are you seeing it now? It's not showing up.
Here it comes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great.
My sincerest apologies.
Well, but Keith, if you have 2 screens, then you don't have a problem.
I'm not stepping on that one. So we're super excited to have a really strong itinerant staff. Some of the other things that come along with the job in special ed that kind of sight unseen from people out is that we have 2 grants running all the time. And working with Mrs. Scalf on those, it seems like right now we have 15 of those going on just because of the year of COVID. So we didn't close those out. So we have a 611, which is all special ed students, and a 619, which is for pre-K only. So those are our kids who have not entered kindergarten yet. So we always have 2 of those grants open and working on those. The other part that maybe the community and the Board of Trustees doesn't see is all of these compliance indicators that we are measured on each and every year. Some of these are on a 3-year cycle where we are seen from the state, and some of these we are reported on a yearly basis. So it is my job to make sure that we maintain compliance on all of those indicators, as well as least restrictive environment. And that's one that Richmond Community Schools gets hit on every year. And the reason that we are always in the LRE, and I say trouble, and I use that term very loosely, is because Wernley is within our local school district. So Wernley students are court placed, but they do count as part of our LRE. So they show a separate special education. We can extract those students, but they do show up on us initially. So we always have to go in and extract those students. And that's always based on our December 1 count. And as you can imagine, Wernley's population is typically up in the wintertime because that's when kids typically are kind of maneuvering around inside and getting themselves into some trouble.
I also oversee Section 504, and currently in Richmond Community Schools, we have exactly 100 students on a 504, and that is separate from special education. So a student cannot be on a 504 and have an IEP. Those are two very separate things. So on top of the 1,200, this is another 100 students who may get accommodations or services based on what we need. Mrs. O'Brien and I worked last year, and actually maybe the end of the previous school year, and looked at our forms. And the forms on Section 504 had not been touched or updated for years. So we worked with Churchill and Antrim, and they did an audit of all of our paperwork the summer of 2020. So not this past summer, but the summer before. We retrained all of our principals with a CCHA professional development opportunity. And what we have to do is make sure that we are doing that, because there is no kind of middle ground between the schools and the Office of Civil Rights. So if a parent gets upset with us with a 504, their first step is Office of Civil Rights. So we really work hard. Our principals do a great job, work directly with our nurses. Many of those 504s are medical 504s. We, at one time in this corporation, we had 19 diabetics. And at Richmond High School in one school year, we had up to 17 diabetics. And so you can imagine what our nurses go through on a daily basis working with students like that, just maintaining their physical health throughout the school day. So that is something that is a part of our department and part of what we do, and our principals and administrators do an excellent job of overseeing that. We currently have 254 students, and I should say as of the time that I created this document, but I know that we've had 2 newcomers to Richmond High School just this week. So we have students who have come in from out of country into Richmond High School this week. So that number is probably stands at 256 right now or more. When you see those levels, we give each one of those kids a test every school year called the WIDA. And WIDA is our judgment of whether or not, let me rephrase that, not our judgment, how we are judged by the Department of Ed on the growth of our English learners. We currently, as you can see, that level 3 is that cusp of kids that we just can't get over. And so something is impeding their language development that we work really, really hard on. That level 3 is typically our 4th through 6th grade. They kind of sit there for a little while, and we have a hard time just pushing them on up. Once we get them into that level 4, they can typically exit within a year. Our littles, those level 1s are our brand new kindergartners typically, or our students who are newcomers to the United States. I'm blessed to have 4 licensed, let me rephrase that, 3 licensed and 1 who is taking her test to be licensed. She has completed her coursework. 4 EL teachers who are licensed. You can see kind of there the grade level focus that each one of them have. We have also blessed to have 4 instructional interpreters, and 3 of them do have a bachelor's degree. And 1 has an associate's degree. So we have well-educated and well-versed instructional interpreters. For the first time this year, I have encountered receiving documents from Beirut, Lebanon. And so I was able to work as a partnership with Earlham and Mr. Sanya at Earlham, and he was able to translate those documents. Oddly enough, we were super lucky that the student was evaluated in their native language, and he was able to interpret all of that. So we appreciate Earlham's partnership as we have worked through not just Spanish speakers in Richmond anymore, but we have, I think, 14 different languages of our English learners. There's also 2 grants that go with our English learner population, an NESP grant, which is non-English speaking grant, and that is on a 1-year cycle. We have seen that grant increase significantly because it is a state grant, while we've seen Title III decrease significantly. The nice thing is those 2 have balanced out, and we do pay for 2 of our instructional interpreters through those grants. So that does not come out of general fund. And they're just like every other federal grant, the Title III is on a 2-year cycle.
This year, I've had the pleasure of working with Mrs. Laudermilk for the last couple years, but this year is her transition into Hibbard and the transition of the high ability grant going back over there. She, being a new principal, has done an excellent job of trying to find a balance. But as you can imagine, the start of this school year, we need to give each other a lot of grace. And so I've been working pretty closely with her and helped her complete the high ability grant. The high ability grant kind of focuses on the growth of all students, and it has to support all of the testing. And we test and screen, and we've talked about that. Kindergarten, we screen all of our students and give the full COGAT to the top 25. Second grade, we do the full COGAT for all of our students. In the fifth grade, the full COGAT for all of them, and that's an online assessment. The biggest chunk of our grant is purchasing the items that we need to be able to give that screening and testing. That is a huge chunk of money, anywhere from $18,000 to $21,000 a year. We got some kickback, and we were able to purchase enough to get us through the next school year. So this school year and next year is paid for. So we've loosened up some dollars for some professional development to make sure that teachers are getting what they need to create some enrichment. So that is something that Mrs. Laudermilk and the team of specialists will be working on. Each building has a high ability consultant, and those consultants need to make sure that the kids that are still in their buildings that are not a part of the Hibbard program are still receiving services. So we're going to really kind of focus and make sure that all kids are getting equitable services for high ability. McKinney-Vento, it is alarming to me to think that we have 47 last year. We had 47 homeless youth in our corporation. This number is down, and in the year of COVID, it kind of surprised me that it went down. I think part of that is that it ran over from year to year, and then the grace period of the lack of evictions that had previously existed in our community. So last year we had 47 students that we reported to the state as homeless. 26 of those are doubled up, and doubled up could mean I go live with grandma, or my whole family goes and lives with grandma. But if I've lost my housing due to hardship, then that is considered homeless, and we have to provide them equitable services and ensure that they can stay in their home school and that school stays stable for them. So as far as what that looks like, it could just be a student moving in with a grandparent, an aunt and uncle, the whole family relocating. But it has to be not by choice, but by economic hardship. We had 12 students last year at some point that were living in the shelter, and we had 9 who were living in hotels or motels here in Richmond. This year, Mrs. O'Brien has worked to create an opportunity for us to have a communities and schools resource navigator again for the 21-22 school year. And that person will kind of be the liaison between the school and all of the supports that exist within our community. So once the student is identified as homeless, then we will, this resource navigator will help that family get partnered up with resources that exist within the community. This is one that I've presented to you multiple times on, is our Centerstone Partnership. Chris Nunn is our Children and Family Services, and I am just that liaison between Centerstone and the schools. If something's going on, Chris and I get together, problem solve, and then meet with the school staff to try to figure out things. But we are really, really blessed to have Centerstone. And I know that Dr. Wright talked about when he went out and visited schools, that was one of the things that administrators and schools said is a huge impact in their buildings. Having those master level therapists is a big benefit to our students, and being able to take the stigma away of mental health and kids being evaluated right at school for those services is a huge relief to parents to not have to go someplace that may not have been a good place for them to go while they were younger. So our Centerstone Partnership, it is ongoing. It is always growing. Chris Nunn has brought in multiple programs, the Bounce Back program. She's just done really great things. And pilots them in our buildings with willing partners. And so that partnership continues to grow. And the great thing is that as you watch numbers, when I report them to you through the board updates, you can watch the Centerstone numbers increase, but the RCS numbers decrease. That means our kids are getting services outside of school. And so that's how we know we're going to have healthy youth. The last part that I am really super excited about is the social, emotional, and behavioral wellness. And that has been challenged at the state a little bit. And so that scares me when they start talking about that and taking that away, and that's not our priority. But Richmond Community Schools, since February of 2017, has really been working on the social, emotional, behavioral wellness of our students. And not only our students, but in the time of COVID, our staff. We have to have people who are regulated. Lori Desautels often says an unregulated adult cannot regulate a child. So this year, our focus for Richmond Community Schools is our care plan. That is something that our cadre worked on last year, and we spent a lot of time on. CARE stands for connection, awareness, regulation, and empathy. We created a care plan for each building, and it kind of is a spin-off of the old PBIS, but it just kind of took the best of PBIS, the best of what we knew of social, emotional, behavioral wellness, and kind of merged those two into our RCS care plan. We created some non-negotiables that our team felt like every school needed to have, but then we wanted to have autonomy because every building isn't identical. The needs aren't the same. So we created this skeleton care plan for them to work on. And that is a working document for them to work through this school year. I'm sorry, Aaron, do you have a question? Oh, you're muted. Aaron, you're muted.
I do apologize. I got interrupted by work. And so if I made a gesture that I had a question, I do apologize for that. So please
Aaron,
forgive me.
she's asking because you have your hand raised. Do you see the little raised hand? Just unraise it. Can you just
That
click
was raised about 30 minutes ago.
I know. There you go.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Remuting.
So our RCS care plan is just something that is a growing document this year. But part of that care plan does include some adult supports as well. So every month we're giving lessons out by grade level to all of our teachers to teach. So all kindergarten students are getting the same, all first grade students. Richmond High School and Dennis Intermediate are having to do some things creatively because where do you fit that into a very structured 7-period schedule? Richmond High School is doing that through their announcements, and Mrs. Vandervoort is accomplishing that through advisory period a few days a week. So it's super exciting to know that our kids are getting social, emotional, behavioral supports taught specifically for their needs and with this care plan, and that we're all on the same page. The blessing that we have here is the partnership that we have with Leslie Bolzer and More Than Words. Leslie has taken More Than Words and those community words and built them in and really given us 2 days worth of lessons that align with More Than Words. So she's taken the monthly More Than Words and merged that with our focus words that we have. And I would be happy to share that care plan with you if you are curious, because we do have a monthly what our focus is and then what we're preparing for the next month. We also built in this year, one Tuesday every month is built for SEBW without exception, that we are training teachers and we're training staff to support our kids in the learning environment. I couldn't do all of this without our cadre, which is about a 40-member group of people who volunteered to do this. Every building has at least 2 staff members. And so that is a huge part of that care plan and putting that all together, that cadre of folks that we meet with on a regular basis. We also have 2 behavior specialists that we, as a corporation, are super, super lucky to have. A lot of corporations don't have that. If you ask any one of our administrators, they would say they need more of them because they make an impact on their buildings, but they're only there 1 day a week. They're spread very, very thin. But it is 2 people, Vicky Sane and Michael French, both serve as we had originally split before the reconfiguration, east side and west side, so that they could follow their kids through middle school. And so how we handle that this year is that Mike and Vicky spent a lot of time together bonding and rebuilding those relationships and shifting those relationships from one behavior specialist to the other at the 4th grade and then at the 5th grade and then at the 7th grade. So they spent a lot of time just really in our intermediate schools, but because they each have 4 buildings, they really only spend about a day a week in each one of those buildings, and then they add 1 building each week. Everything else that I do a monthly professional development for special education. And this year we're trying to do it a little differently. I had everybody coming together, which made it very, very difficult because you might have a speech pathologist with an applied skills teacher. As you can imagine, the professional development that those 2 folks need is very, very different. So this year I have recreated the professional development wheel, and each month I'm taking a group. So like I've met with applied skills 1 month, I will meet with resource teachers 1 month, itinerant staff, so that I will get through all of them once each semester. But that doesn't mean that at any time we can't get together. We also do social emotional behavioral wellness professional development 2 to 3 times a semester. It just honestly, this year, it just kind of depends on whether or not we can get subs because we try to do that during their day when they can all be together. We have been able to do that in the evenings with partnerships with a couple of our churches who have allowed us in to do some evening professional development. So we're kind of open to what we'll be able to do. And then we also do English learners professional development. I meet with them 2 to 3 times a semester. One of the most important parts of my job is maintaining a relationship with the Department of Ed. The nice thing is now I've done this job long enough that when I walk into the meeting, I'm many times more veteran than the people from the DOE because they seem to change far more often than our directors change. But when I walk in now, the folks know me. They know me by name. They know me by sight. And so that is a huge it's a huge barrier removed for us because the DOE, I'm not afraid to call them. I'm not afraid to get the help that we need, the questions that we need answered, and know where my resources are now in all of those areas. Each one of them offer professional development 2 to 3 times a month 2 to 3 times a semester for a director. So if you think about that, that means I'm out at least 6 days a semester just doing professional development on each opportunity. And that doesn't include, because I'm trying to shift that a little bit to Cassie for those high ability when she's ready and willing to go. I also work with Indiana Resource Networks. Pattons is a huge organization that I work with closely, and they allow us to borrow devices to support our students. And those devices are relatively expensive, but we can borrow from them, see how our kids respond, and then if we need to purchase, we purchase. But it's kind of that buffer between purchasing a big item and it's like going to the lending library to see if something works. And the IEP Resource Center is a huge partner with us, and we work closely with them, especially on that least restrictive environment compliance that we talked about earlier. The other things that you can see there is I just have to monitor compliance in all of our areas, as well as look at the trends and data. If our EL kids aren't growing the way that we expect, or our SLD, our kids with specific learning disabilities aren't growing the way they are, then I need to make sure that teachers are getting the resources they need to supplement that curriculum. And so that's all part of what I do. And then our monthly SEBW that we're doing that I've spoke about. And down there at the bottom, you can say I said to be continued, because I feel like right now everything is ever changing in the world of exceptional ed, and new partnerships are frequently happening and growing. So I appreciate your time, and that kind of sums it up in a really quick fashion, I hope.
Mrs. Hobbs, thank you so very much. And just to piggyback and add too briefly on what Mrs. Hobbs so eloquently just presented regarding supports, as I had referenced in my board update, and Mrs. Hobbs alluded to Dr. Lori Desatel from Butler University. Throughout the course of my tenure in education, Dr. Desatel and my previous districts worked very closely and hand in hand. And as a school principal, she actually was at the time working with my particular school on self-regulation amongst our faculty and staff. And as Mrs. Hobbs just referenced, when we saw that educators were able to maintain a sense of self-regulation, they were that much better in a classroom when it came to instruction, when it came to overall care and providing service for our students. Prior to my departure from that respective district, we were working to incorporate some of those same practices to our student body so that students then became self-regulated overall and were able to receive the immaculate and quality field instruction that our educators were providing. And so just from that standpoint of, we understand and know that a self-regulated brain is at rest to the point to where such students' brain is now able to receive all the necessary education and learning, but is also now able to reach that self-actualization that I mentioned in the board update regarding Maslow's theory. And so as we move down the road, Mrs. Hobbs referenced that we right now are at roughly 26% of our school district is exceptional learners. And that is a number that without a doubt will continue to increase. And so as we move down the road, turning our attention to such supports in such a community that we now find ourselves to be here in Richmond, I think is going to be something that we'll continue to improve upon. And so, Mrs. Hobbs, thank you for the presentation. And as you referenced, there are some talented educators throughout the entire district, but within our exceptional learning department, they've been doing a tremendous job. So thank you, ma'am.
Yeah,
Sheila, I wanted to also just thank you. It was very informative just to see the breakdown of everything that you're involved in and everything you're doing. So thank you. I really appreciated that.
Thank you. I had a couple questions. I don't know if we wanted to do that.
Sure.
Okay.
If I can answer them, I'll answer them.
And if you can't, I don't want to put you on the spot at all. But like with our IEP students, I'm guessing we track that. What the trends are amongst the new students, new IEPs. What preventative or how do we translate that to measures? I know pre-K we kind of talk about a lot, but what trends in IEP are you seeing that we could possibly impact at the board level, if that makes sense?
I think one of the things that you should know is that developmental delay, gosh, I think it's been 3 years ago now, developmental delay extended to through age 9. So students who would previously have dropped off because they're probably those kids with a specific learning disability, now we're holding on to them to make sure we do early intervention. So I do want to make sure that you understand that, because our numbers did go up when we were able to leave developmental delay, because otherwise at the end of pre-K, before entrance into kindergarten, they would have dropped off of our list. So we're servicing a lot of kids in K1 who have a developmental delay. I think the biggest thing right now for us, and I've had conversations with Mrs. Sonsini and Mrs. O'Brien and Dr. Wright, is that we have to do better with core instruction. When we're doing better with core instruction and differentiating at core instruction, we're going to identify fewer and fewer kids. Right now, I think a lot of what we are doing is really good stuff, but special ed becomes a solution. Allows a kid who's struggling academically to kind of get another additional support. Some of our kids are just kids who are always going to need extra support.
They're those kids who sit there at kind of that 85 IQ that are just kind of teetering. And so if we continue to keep kids and have interventionists and places for kids to stay in that core instruction, we will identify less and less kids. So the key is at the state, and this is kind of scary statement for me to even come out of my mouth, but the state teeters at about 14%. So as you can tell, we're well above the state average. A little bit of that is economic. A little bit of that is out of our control, because you have to remember on our December 1 count, we have Wernley kids that many times count into that number. That is out of our control. We can't control those numbers. So we get a lot of ED, and it's called ED full-time or ED part-time. So emotional disability full-time. All of the kids, let me rephrase that. Almost all of the kids that come through Wernley have that label. And that is something, so like when you think about what we can do at the board level is just to continue to support the intervention that can happen to keep kids preventative. So preventative intervention. And I know that many times we talk about whether our interventionist, that does not impact the classroom. It really does impact the classroom, and it impacts numbers, because we're able to support kids differently than a gen ed teacher with 23 kids sitting in front of them. If they can get out and get small group and we can sustain that, then we're going to make a difference. I don't know if that answers the question, John, or not.
I guess it kind of came from, I think almost a decade ago, it was the overdose babies, at the hospital was, those children are in our school now. And not that we can have a huge impact on the drug problem, but we do have an impact on the drug problem. And so I didn't know if there was a common, I don't know what it is. And so I'm asking you guys.
So we are seeing a lot of kids that we are labeling at 3. So I just talked to Jenny Aloriaga, who is our educational diagnostician for only pre-K. If they screen the bare minimum, and I see Emily sitting there and she works in preschool classrooms. If we screen the bare minimum, we are right now are screening 100 kids. We're asking to do 100 evaluations of pre-K kids. That doesn't include the 75 we already have labeled. So we are starting to see some of those babies come into us. And what we're seeing is lots and lots of sensory needs. So supporting and helping people understand that the sensory impacts the education is going to be huge. A kid who can't sit still, a kid who can't stop moving, a kid who can't stop. So some kids, their clothes bother them because they feel heavy to them, and that's all real. And so we are identifying those kids. That's that developmental delay that I was talking about. A lot of those kids fit into that developmental delay, and because we're not ready to let them go, which we previously did before they went into kindergarten, those kids are sticking with them until we can get them the tools to kind of exit. So I think you're spot on, Jeff or John. That opioid epidemic has hit our schools, and it's hit us with a lot of high sensory needs, supporting the ideas of regulation rooms and regulation stations in classrooms. I've been able to do that with a lot of grant dollars. Mrs. O'Brien has been able to support that with a lot of grant dollars. That's another way to support classrooms and teachers, is making sure that they have the sensory things that they need in their classrooms.
Mrs. Hobbs, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Weber. I'm sorry.
You can go ahead. I had an unrelated second question.
Go for it, sir. Go for it.
I was just curious on the high ability screening. So for someone new to Wayne County or Richmond, or someone that attends another school in our area, how does that process work?
So any student who has not been tested, we test. And honestly, this year we tested every kid from out of district that wanted tested, because the way that we look at that is if we can get them in our corporation, it's an additional $6,500 or $6,700, whatever it is now. So this year, Mrs. Laudermilk did test, and she was even testing kids after school started. But what we typically do, if a student comes into us, if they come into us identified, then they have the opportunity to get into that programming right away. If they are out of district or have never been screened, which by the way is illegal, you have to identify kids at kindergarten. But if they haven't done that, then we automatically do that. We typically hold a lot of those screenings in the spring, because otherwise you're just doing one here, one there. If it won't make a difference in their programming, let me say that, if it won't make a difference in their programming, so those kids that could go into the Hibbard program, we might identify, go ahead and test them right away, because we want to get them in the appropriate programming, if that makes sense. Like, we need to make sure that their programming is appropriate. But if it won't make it, so if they're a K1 kid, they're at kindergarten, they're going to get screened while they're in Richmond anyhow, and that typically happens in January. If they're not, if they come to us after that screening, then we would screen right away. If they were a first grader, we may go ahead, because a good teacher is already enriching them in their classroom based on the classroom data. So we would screen them in the spring and try to get as many first graders outside as we can. But anything outside the district, we want those kids here, so we try to do those right away.
So are we the only one that use the COGAT test?
No, most schools do use the COGAT. There's a few others that are, and we're purchasing some additional, because that's one of the concerns that people had, is we only had the COGAT, and if a kid didn't do well on that. So we have purchased, and I'm sorry, I don't have those names in front of me. We have purchased some other tests in case that one doesn't work. But we also use some of our achievement tests, consistency of achievement test at high performance as well.
But a parent could, and this is I'll let Kristen go after this. A parent could, if they were interested in our high ability programs, they could just simply call your office.
They actually, right now, they call Mrs. Laudermilk, because she's doing all of the screening.
Okay.
If they call here, we refer them to Mrs. Laudermilk, but they can call me and we can get them to the right place.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Kristen?
I had a couple of questions but to tag on to the high ability. The high ability transition, does that transition mean that your transition, it's moving from out of your umbrella and your oversight over to Mrs. Laudermilk, or what does that terminology mean?
Kind of. I'm still supporting and overseeing Hibbard, but she is kind of taking on the high ability grant and the kind of the professional development of our high ability consultants as a whole. So I'm still going to be supporting her, because I have taken on the oversight of Hibbard, because the programs that are there were under my umbrella, and honestly, I worked with Cassie, so I wanted it to be a smooth transition for her. So the transition of the high ability is kind of out of my department, but not really. But it is kind of giving her some ownership into that program.
Oops, got it. And then my second question was the 26% or 25.6% of students. Is that only students with IEPs, or does that include students with a 504 plan as well?
Those are two separate things. A 504 is completely separate from an IEP. So we are at 25.6% special ed. Those are students with an IEP. That could be a speech only student. Let's be real, but it could also be a student with multiple disabilities. So it is any student who has an IEP that requires special services from a specialized teacher.
Okay, and the 504 plan would be students who just need accommodations, but they don't need the teacher services, just the classroom teacher is able to provide those accommodations.
Some of those students, the reality is in Richmond is that we've been able to provide some additional services for even our 504 students with permission from parents. So if a student is just really struggling and we're kind of in that window where we want to test, but we're not really sure, we will provide them some additional services. like their small group testing, those kinds of things would be many times fall on the special ed teacher because they already have those groups running. Or an interventionist. An interventionist will support 504 students as well.
And do kids ever transition out of the IEP to a 504?
We have had a few in my career. Typically, it's the other way around. They transition from a 504 to an IEP because the services need to be sustained at a higher level. In Richmond, I will be most of our 504s and are medical. We have a lot of students who have medical needs, and so those 504s. Like if you think about a student with that is a diabetic, they may need to have their sugar checked prior to testing. And so that requires a 504 because it can alter their testing needs. So we have a lot of students who don't have a 504 because they're able to, I think about just in 7 years, the way that the pump and the insulin pump and their meters and all of that has come along. We have less and less students on a 504 because technology has come such a long way. But most of our 504s, most of those 100 are medical. There's I don't know, probably 25% of those are kind of the ADHD kids that would need some accommodations.
And dyslexia things.
Yes, we actually, with the dyslexia screener, we have very few because dyslexia identified is just a specific learning disability. So it's kind of, that's shifted a little. And we often see that they might start out with that. But we don't have many that are looking at dyslexia the way that the new kind of the law reads. People are wanting more services than that.
Mrs. Hobbs, I also, if you don't mind, just like to simply piggyback on a few of the things that you presented on. As we know, there are a plethora of misconceptions with regard to special education, and so many outside of the exceptional learning world believe that they have a good understanding, and many do. However, there are so many different nuances and intricacies that you all deal with on a daily basis. And you referenced, for example, correct me if I'm wrong, but every student is eligible for a 504 throughout the district. However, 504 oftentimes gets placed and slid under the exceptional learning umbrella. I can recall in my previous stops and stints, our exceptional learning directors and exceptional learning faculty staff would oftentimes become frustrated because they would always be closely aligned and associated with the 504, which actually falls more under the counseling, our guidance counseling umbrella per se. But however, it's great that you're still servicing and equipping our students with those 504 needs. Let me just, if you can explain and just elaborate, when you say core instruction, if indeed we could just drill down and capture and increase the student achievement dial of core instruction, it would help and assist your department. Can you just touch on that core instruction piece and how it could be beneficial down the road, if indeed we're able to, as you said, capture it early enough?
I think early intervention is going to be the key for core instruction. That early reading skills, the early math skills, that's where we see the holes that then develop into learning disability as a student gets older. We typically don't identify a student with a specific learning disability until second grade because we want to make sure those foundational skills have had an opportunity to learn. When I'm talking core instruction, I'm talking those basic readiness skills, those skills that kids, that teachers teach, that help kids, and it can even be their executive functioning skills, the ready to learn, just the ability to do that. When a kid comes in wired, if we're doing some, and I will tell you, I do believe SEBW is making a difference in the identification of students with emotional disabilities, because now we're looking at interventions as opposed to identification. And that's just an understanding of trauma and how that affects the brain and that educational neuroscience that we've done. But when we talk about core instruction, we're really talking about those basic readiness skills, those basic executive functioning skills. And And when I say that, it goes back to being able to differentiate and not think that you have to teach page 1, page 2, page 3, but really responding to the data that you see in front of you and making adjustments, kind of that, in-flight adjustments to teaching in the classroom. And teachers are working hard and they're doing their very best to do that. But I think it's actually just having the resources to make it happen.
Great. And speaking of such resources as you referenced, and as we've talked time and again, and as I've come to understand, not only do our exceptional learning educators, our special education teachers, need to be well versed in general education, but they also have to have the special education piece to accompany. Again, we have fantastic and amazing educators throughout the district. However, with our exceptional learning, not only do they, again, have to be well versed and up to speed with state standards on the general education side, they also have to be able to be as well versed and competent on the special education side to meet all of the compliances that you presented earlier, which all have a ton of documentation. And so if you can just the pre-screening, how long with regard to that process? You said roughly 100 throughout the presentation. Can you just describe that process just a little bit?
So our preschool teachers, I have a team and a diagnostic team. It's Jenny Aloriaga is our preschool educational diagnostician. Amy Zimmerman is our preschool teacher, evaluation teacher, and Emily Dickerson is our preschool SLP. Those 3 ladies go out to all of our Head Start sites because we are responsible for child find and early identification of those students. So they screen at all of those buildings. And then at our preschool sites within our district, this year they're going to try to screen all of them. And Emily, can you give me a thumbs up if you've seen? Okay, so this year that was their hope, is to screen them. Previously, they just took a teacher recommendation from our preschools from within our district. So we screen every student, every three to kindergarten age student. And if we see something that kind of, for lack of a better term, is a red flag, then we ask a parent to do an evaluation. And so then at that point, you have to have parent permission. So of those 100, our hope will be that we can get about 75% of those parents to sign that paperwork, to send it back and say, yes, I want my child evaluated. It's much, much easier to do here in Richmond schools because our preschool teachers can kind of hound those parents, and they see them, they hand those papers to them, and they follow them out to their cars. Our Head Start sites are a little harder to get that paperwork because those kids are bused and somebody different could pick them off the bus, but we hand deliver. We've done porch drop-offs. So this screening moves from a screening process where we screen every kid. If we see a red flag, either language or some of those sensory things that we talked about earlier, any kind of behavioral needs that we might see through that screening process, or a teacher reports to us, then we would ask for a full evaluation. And that's what that 100 is. So of the screening of all of those sites, they have 100 students right now that are kind of the top tiered kids that they want to screen and get more information on.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Hobbs. And as you mentioned, that preventative maintenance piece from a service standpoint is imperative, and we'll definitely continue to improve upon it because, again, correct me if I'm wrong, if indeed things are identified, needs are identified early enough, if we can indeed provide servicing around such needs, by the time our students are progressing down the proverbial grade level line, by the time they're intermediate, middle, high school, it becomes more of a refining than as sometimes is just being identified here of late in many schoolhouses. So tremendous job. I appreciate it. I apologize. I just wanted to highlight and touch on the fact that, again, with more than a quarter of our population, exceptional learning and growing, it's definitely an area that we'll continue to support and improve. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, we're still in board reports and discussion. Are there any additional board reports or discussion?
I'd like to regress a second if I can.
Yes.
Yeah, back on the school improvement plans, I had several notes, but the one that I really wanted to ask publicly was I noticed that the goal for one of our buildings, Dennis, last year was and I don't have it open, but I think it was like 90% attendance rate or something like that. And it came back that the goal was met, which with with COVID and how attendance was kept and all of those types of things, I thought that that was a pretty miraculous number. But I guess the question that I really had was that it made reference to the fact that there was an attendance liaison that was funded, and they felt like that was the reason the attendance was 90%. And since it wasn't funded anymore, I noticed that they changed their goal from school attendance to lessen the office referrals. And I'm not a big fan of office referrals as being a goal in itself anyway, because that doesn't really tell you whether you're being successful or not. I mean, that just tells you that you're keeping your kids in the classroom. It doesn't address whether you're dealing with the behavior or not. But besides that, I was sitting there thinking to myself that if their funding allowed a 90% attendance rate, then to me that's a good place to put some resources if we could, have attendance that high. So I just wanted to mention that. I don't really, know what all went into that calculation and how that number came up with, but I just thought that was really worth mentioning. So that's the only thing I really wanted to say about that. Other than the fact that if it really works, then we need to find funding.
Yeah, maybe Dr. Wright could just kind of confer and confirm those numbers and get back with us.
Will do, absolutely. And to your point, Mr. Schleifer, as we know, when students are showing up and they're actively engaged and consistently exercising positive attendance, it increases the overall achievement of all students. And so I'll definitely get some numbers and some figures, some confirmation, and get back with the board, report back.
Maybe Mrs. Scalf.
I just wanted to let everyone know that that was a part of their Title I school improvement grant. And so that was something that both Dennis and Test had utilized through title funds to help make that position a possibility. So I'm sure that we can dig into the data and find out more, but that was how that funding came to be, was through that process.
All right. Thank you. Anyone else? All right. We will move on to a preview of upcoming meeting and events with Dr. Wright.
Board President, Trustees, our next meeting is scheduled for October 6th, 2 weeks from tonight. And at this particular point, there are no outstanding events that are to be reported.
Mr. Morey.
I didn't know if we wanted to mention something about senior night. I don't know if there's a plan for some sort of senior night, event. I don't know about details yet, but.
Mr. Morey, as you mentioned, there is indeed a plan underway to eventually present to our community the ideas and celebrations that we are looking forward to putting in motion to highlight and recognize our current seniors. And as we are finalizing the details of such plan, we'll definitely be releasing that to the public shortly, over the next few days, we hope.
We could probably tell them the date, though, at least, right?
Sure. Go ahead, Mrs. Stoltz.
October 1st, right? Am I right there? Friday at the football field. Is that the plan?
October 1st is the date.
Yep.
Yes, and so
So
as you mentioned,
exciting details to come.
yes, exciting details to come for the October 1st senior night and celebration there at the home football game. We definitely want to send our seniors out with a bang, and we're going to work hard to do just that.
I would just add, I believe the 28th is the first combined choir orchestra concert at Civic Hall, which I think is the first time that anyone seems to be able to remember such an event. And so I plan to be in attendance, and I think it'll be a great community event as well. So would offer that upcoming event. Any others? All right. Item 8, adjournment and bell ringer. Dr. Wright.
President Weber, trustees, I simply would like to acknowledge and congratulate Charles Elementary School and their chapter of the National Elementary Honor Society. This is the 7th year that Charles, the group is organized there at Charles. There were 21 students inducted into their annual ceremony. Family members were able to watch the ceremony via their Facebook Live feed, and the students, along with faculty, staff, and administration, did a tremendous job of highlighting the excellence there at Charles, as well as the goal moving forward is to introduce the Honor Society at all of our institutions and schoolhouses throughout the district. And I know Charles, for the past several years, has been modeling what many of the other schoolhouses will soon also embark upon. And so kudos to the Charles Elementary School community there. It's also Indiana's College Go Week, and we're encouraging our Richmond High School seniors to apply for college. There's a list of colleges that have waived their application fees this week alone. And so, as we all understand the importance of higher education as well as vocational education, I mean, any and all times we can push toward students toward that higher learning, we definitely will. And so we encourage students now this week, as well as moving forward, to continue to apply for college. Finally, congratulations are in order for Homecoming King John Carter and Homecoming Queen Jakaya Lotz. Last Friday, they were acknowledged and awarded the Royal King and Queen titles at the football game versus Marion. So congratulations to our homecoming king and queen.
Thank you, Dr. Wright, and congratulations. Before we conclude, does anyone else have anything for the good of the cause? All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you.